The grand ballroom of the seven-star hotel shimmered with golden light, chandeliers casting a soft glow over the long table covered in polished mahogany and lined with contracts worth $500 million. Waiters in crisp uniforms moved silently between dignitaries, pouring glasses of vintage champagne and setting out golden trays of delicacies. Everyone's attention was fixed on the imminent signing ceremony that would seal one of the most powerful business alliances in the Middle East. The billionaire, a man of confidence and reputation, stood at the center of it all, shaking hands with his Arabic partners. Cameras were ready, the press was waiting, and yet somewhere in the background, someone entirely unexpected was about to change everything. In the dimly lit corridor just outside that ballroom, the maid's daughter walked quietly, clutching a small notepad and wearing her mother's spare uniform. She wasn't supposed to be there. Her mother had fallen sick that morning, and out of desperation, the girl had offered to fill in. No one noticed the difference. She kept her head down, moved silently, and tried her best to avoid drawing attention. But as fate would have it, her path crossed with something that should never have reached her ears. As she passed the service room near the back of the hall, she heard voices speaking in hushed Arabic tones. The language wasn't foreign to her. She had learned enough from her mother's years working for Arabic families. The words were low, deliberate, and laced with laughter that carried a certain arrogance. She paused, pressing herself against the wall, pretending to adjust her tray. Her heart began to race when she caught fragments of the conversation that chilled her. They weren't talking about the success of the deal. They were talking about how Azili, the billionaire, had fallen into their trap. They mentioned secret clauses buried deep within the document, legal phrases that would allow them to seize his assets, take control of his shipping lines, and eventually drive his company into debt that would make them his new masters. The laughter that followed was cruel, confident, the kind of laughter that came from people who knew they had already won. The girl's hands trembled. Her mother had always told her to stay out of the affairs of the rich, that silence was the safest path for people like them. But something about hearing those men mock the billionaire's trust ignited a strange fire in her. She had seen the billionaire once before, from afar, giving charity to her school, his smile genuine, his words kind. He wasn't a bad man, just a man too, trusting of the wrong people. And now, he was about to lose everything. She knew she shouldn't stay. She should walk away, deliver the tray, and pretend she had heard nothing. But her conscience screamed louder than fear. She crouched behind the service door, listening intently as one of the Arabic men, a tall figure with a gold watch and sharp tone, explained how the document had been drafted. He boasted that even the billionaire's lawyers hadn't noticed the hidden clause on page 47, written in Arabic legal phrasing that appeared harmless in translation, but was designed to transfer ownership once the signatures were dry. They even joked about how they'd toast to the new king of the empire once the ink settled. She covered her mouth to suppress a gasp. Her pulse hammered in her ears. The sound of footsteps made her freeze as one of the men stepped out into the corridor. He looked both ways, suspicious. She ducked into the shadows, pressing herself behind a cart of dishes, barely breathing until he turned away. When the voices faded, she exhaled shakily and leaned against the wall, trying to think. What could she do? She was just the maid's daughter. No one would believe her. And worse, if she spoke up, she could cost her mother her job or even their home. The weight of fear pressed on her chest, but the image of the billionaire shaking those men's hands replayed in her mind. He didn't know he was being led to ruin. She thought about her late father, who had always said that doing what's right wasn't about power, it was about courage. Courage meant standing up even when no one expected you to. She straightened, gripping her notepad tighter, and made her way toward the ballroom. Her eyes darted between the journalists and executives. The billionaire stood at the center, smiling proudly as the Arabic partners handed him a golden pen. She saw the thick folder resting before him, the very document that carried the trap. Her voice caught in her throat as she approached the edge of the crowd, trying to think of how to warn him without causing chaos. The music softened. The billionaire raised his pen. Cameras clicked in unison. She opened her mouth, but no words came. She froze as a waiter brushed past her, whispering to clear the empty glasses. Her palms were sweaty, her heart pounding like a drum in her ears. She took a deep breath, then stepped forward, only to be stopped by a security guard who scowled and told her to stay back. She tried to speak, but fear silenced her again. Then, as the billionaire bent over to sign, she saw one of the Arabic men nod to another, an almost imperceptible signal that made her blood run cold. That was the final moment. She could not stay silent anymore. With trembling courage, she blurted out something that cut through the murmuring crowd. Her words stumbled out in a mix of English and Arabic, enough to make the billionaire pause. The entire room turned toward her. Every eye fell on the girl in a maid's uniform, standing with tears welling in her eyes, clutching her notepad as if it were her only shield. The Arabic men stiffened instantly. The billionaire frowned, confused. In that breathless silence she spoke again, this time clearly, repeating the exact Arabic phrases she had overheard, the ones about taking his empire, about the clause on page 47. Her accent was imperfect, but her meaning unmistakable. Gasps rippled through the audience. The Arabic partners exchanged glances, their composure cracking. The billionaire motioned for his lawyer to check the document immediately. Papers rustled. Whispers filled the room, and the girl stood frozen, realizing she had crossed a line she could never return from. But deep inside, she knew she had done what was right. Whether they believed her or not didn't matter at that moment. What mattered was that someone had spoken the truth before it was too late. The billionaire sat confidently at the negotiation table, surrounded by his top advisors, lawyers, and the men he believed were his future business allies. The $500 million deal had been in discussion for months, and today was supposed to be the day everything came to life. The Arabic partners had presented themselves as polished, respectful, and ambitious entrepreneurs who promised to expand his empire into the Gulf market. They had charm, sophistication, and an air of authority that made them seem trustworthy. Yet beneath their calm smiles, something darker brewed, something he could not see through the glittering promises. The contract before him was written in both English and Arabic, as was customary for international agreements. His legal team had reviewed it thoroughly, or so they thought. Every page bore complex paragraphs and fine print, yet nothing appeared amiss to those reading it in translation. What no one realized was that a few strategic lines in the Arabic version had been altered, hidden beneath the veil of legal phrasing so intricate that only someone fluent in the dialect would understand the difference. Those few lines changed everything. In the elegant conference room overlooking the city skyline, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The billionaire adjusted his cufflinks, smiling as flashes from photographers reflected off the glass walls. His partners across the table, the Arabic delegation, sat composed, exchanging courteous words and subtle glances. They knew the trap was nearly sprung. They had spent months carefully constructing the illusion of partnership, sending gifts, hosting dinners, and promising investments so vast that anyone would have been enticed. Their plan was not to share the business, but to absorb it completely. Once the deal was signed, the Arabic version of the contract, recognized as the binding one under the agreement's terms, would transfer ownership of key assets to their holding company within weeks. It was a move of genius and deceit, a strategy cloaked in elegance. The lead negotiator among them, a man named Khalid al-Masri, was particularly skilled in manipulating trust. His words were always warm, his tone respectful, and his understanding of Western business etiquette flawless. He had learned how to charm, how to flatter, and how to mask greed with the grace of diplomacy. Every compliment he offered was calculated, every handshake designed to disarm suspicion. The billionaire, used to straightforward transactions and open deals, had no reason to doubt him. To him, these men represented opportunity, not deception. As they discussed the final clauses, Khalid leaned forward with a practiced smile. "My friend," he said smoothly, "this partnership will open doors for both our nations. It is not just business, it is trust." The billionaire nodded, feeling reassured. He didn't notice how Khalid's assistants exchanged fleeting looks. To them, this wasn't trust, it was conquest through paperwork. Hidden in the depths of the contract was a clause labeled Asset Management Contingency. In English, it appeared to grant shared oversight during the first quarter of the partnership. In Arabic, it stated that failure to meet certain mutually understood financial terms, never listed explicitly, would result in immediate transfer of majority ownership to the Arabic firm. And since those terms were undefined, their lawyers could later claim breach at will. It was a masterpiece of legal manipulation. The billionaire's team, although sharp, didn't have a single Arabic reader among them. They trusted the translation provided by the partners themselves, unaware that the wording was deliberately altered. The Arabic text used archaic financial expressions that even digital translators couldn't catch. Khalid had ensured that every detail was layered with ambiguity, allowing for complete domination once signatures were made. The plan was simple: let the billionaire believe he had secured a $500 million joint venture, then quietly execute the takeover once the ink dried. Within months, his assets, patents, and real estate would belong to them. The trap wasn't merely financial, it was psychological. Khalid had carefully studied his target's personality. The billionaire prided himself on his intuition, his ability to read people. So Khalid made sure to play the perfect friend, loyal, attentive, trustworthy. He shared personal stories about his family, his faith, his struggles, crafting an image of a man of integrity. Each conversation was another layer of manipulation, each dinner another thread tightening around the unsuspecting victim. By the time the contract reached the signing table, the billionaire's confidence was absolute. He felt he was in control, when in reality, every move had been orchestrated from the start. Outside the boardroom, a small crowd gathered: reporters, investors, and staff waiting to witness history. The company's PR team prepared a press release celebrating a new era of international cooperation. Yet inside, the tone was darker. One of Khalid's associates discreetly checked his watch. Everything was on schedule. The moment the pen touched the paper, the empire would begin to shift hands. They had already prepared shell companies in Dubai and Riyadh, bank accounts ready to receive funds, and lawyers briefed to file ownership claims immediately after the signing. Even the media would be fed controlled statements, spinning the story as a strategic merger to mask the truth of the takeover. The billionaire leaned back, unaware of how close he was to disaster. His chief legal officer gave a final nod of approval. Khalid's assistant placed the golden pen on the table with quiet reverence. The room hushed. Cameras clicked. This was the moment they had all been waiting for. The billionaire reached forward, his hands steady, his mind already celebrating the future profits and global expansion that seemed so close. But at that exact moment, something flickered in Khalid's eyes. Flash of triumph. Too quick to notice, but reeled out in that second. The depth of the betrayal was complete. Every kind word, every promise, every gesture of friendship was part of the deception. The Arabic partners had no intention of keeping the billionaire as an equal. To them, he was a stepping stone, a wealthy fool, blinded by ambition. The $500 million deal wasn't about growth. It was about acquisition through deceit. The irony was cruel. The very man who prided himself on his intelligence and caution was moments away from losing everything, not through theft, but through his own signature. The room's atmosphere turned almost electric as the billionaire prepared to sign. His advisors murmured quietly, reviewing notes that no longer mattered. Khalid exchanged a subtle smile with his team, the kind that spoke of silent victory. Everything was unfolding exactly as planned. The empire was within reach. The English text told one story, the Arabic version told another, and soon, reality would follow the latter. No alarms would sound, no confrontation would occur. The theft would be invisible, legal, and absolute. And when the billionaire realized it, it would already be too late. The tension in the ballroom was suffocating as the billionaire stood frozen, the golden pen still hovering above the contract. The maid's daughter's trembling voice had silenced the room, her words echoing through the marble hall like an unexpected thunderclap. At first, no one understood what had just happened. The press whispered among themselves, flashes stopped, and the Arabic partners stiffened visibly. The billionaire turned slowly toward the young girl, his brow furrowed in confusion. Security began to move toward her, but he raised a hand, signaling them to stop. Something in her tone, something in her eyes, told him she wasn't lying. She looked terrified yet determined, as if she had walked through fire just to reach this point. The billionaire asked her calmly what she meant, and she repeated the phrases she had overheard. Her Arabic pronunciation was rough but clear enough for everyone to understand. The words she spoke weren't just random, they were exact excerpts from the private conversation Khalid and his associates had held earlier. Khalid's composure began to crack, as whispers spread through the room. The billionaire's translator quickly asked her to repeat what she'd heard. When she did, the translator's face paled instantly. He confirmed in a trembling voice that those words described a hidden clause transferring ownership of the billionaire's assets to Khalid's company. After signing, the revelation rippled like lightning through the gathering. The billionaire's lawyers instantly flipped through the thick pages of the contract. They found the section she mentioned, page 47, and, when they examined the Arabic text, their expressions turned grim. The clause was there, disguised in technical language, written in a way that changed the entire meaning of the document. The Arabic version, which was to be treated as the binding text under the terms of the deal, contained a hidden transfer of control clause. It was a trap, and the maid's daughter had just exposed it seconds before the billionaire could seal his fate. The crowd erupted into murmurs. Journalists raised their cameras again, and chaos threatened to break out. Khalid tried to regain control, his voice calm but forced. He claimed there must be a misunderstanding, that the girl was misinformed, perhaps confused by translation, but the damage was already done. The billionaire's lawyer, still scanning the document, interrupted him and demanded an explanation for the discrepancy between the English and Arabic texts. The Arabic delegates exchanged nervous glances. Their silence spoke louder than denial. The billionaire's eyes hardened. The easy confidence that had filled the room moments earlier was gone, replaced by cold anger. He asked Khalid directly if he had intended to deceive him. Khalid opened his mouth to speak, but his charm had lost its power. The truth was no longer hidden behind smiles. The maid's daughter stood motionless, her chest rising and falling rapidly. She could feel every eye on her, from the security guards to the reporters. She hadn't planned what would happen next. She had only wanted to stop the disaster. The billionaire turned to her, his voice softer now, asking how she knew. She explained everything, how she had overheard the conversation in Arabic while delivering trays, how they had laughed about using legal traps to seize his empire, how she recognized enough of the language to understand the deception. The honesty in her tone was undeniable. Even the guests could sense it. She wasn't seeking attention or reward. She was trembling, terrified, and brave all at once. The billionaire's team called for immediate translation verification. A neutral translator from the embassy was summoned to confirm the authenticity of the Arabic text. When he arrived minutes later and reviewed the contract, his verdict shattered any remaining illusion. The clause was fraudulent. The Arabic version was deliberately altered to seize ownership, exactly as the girl had described. Gasps filled the hall. The realization spread like wildfire. This was not a partnership, it was a sophisticated act of betrayal. The billionaire, his face pale but composed, turned to the Arabic partners, who now looked cornered. They tried to talk their way out, but the room had turned against them. The press captured every moment, the tension, the anger, the disbelief. One of the investors slammed his hand on the table, demanding answers. Another threatened to call for an official investigation. Khalid, realizing the situation was slipping beyond control, attempted to leave, but security blocked his way. His arrogance faltered, replaced by fear. The billionaire stood and spoke firmly, declaring that the deal was null and void, and that his company would pursue legal action for attempted fraud. The room erupted with murmurs of agreement and relief. The maid's daughter lowered her gaze, unsure of what to do. She had stepped into a world far beyond her own, and yet she had just saved it from destruction. The billionaire approached her slowly, his expression softening. For a moment, she thought he might be angry that she interrupted the event, but instead, he thanked her. His voice carried both gratitude and disbelief. He told her she had done something even his entire legal team had failed to do. Without her, he would have signed his empire away. She tried to speak but couldn't find the words. He could see how frightened she was, how she kept glancing toward the exit as if expecting to be thrown out. Instead, he asked her name, and when she gave it, he promised that her courage would not be forgotten. The Arabic partners were escorted from the hall, their faces dark with defeat. Some journalists rushed after them, demanding statements, while others turned their cameras toward the girl who had exposed them. The billionaire's lawyers gathered the documents, sealing them as evidence. The press conference that was meant to celebrate a $500 million alliance had turned into an international scandal. Within hours, headlines would flood the media. Maid's daughter exposes $500M corporate trap. What was supposed to be a symbol of global partnership had instead revealed the dangers of blind trust in the pursuit of power. As the chaos began to settle, the billionaire walked the girl out of the ballroom. He spoke gently, asking how old she was and how she had learned Arabic. She explained that her mother had worked for Arabic families for years and had taught her bits of the language. It wasn't much, but it was enough to catch what others had missed. The billionaire's eyes softened with admiration. He told her that bravery doesn't come from education or status, it comes from the heart. Her mother, standing weakly by the entrance after hearing the commotion, watched in disbelief as her daughter was thanked by one of the richest men in the country. The billionaire offered to ensure her family would never have to struggle again, but the girl shook her head, saying she only wanted her mother's job to be safe. The billionaire smiled faintly and nodded. For the first time that day, he felt something money couldn't buy: trust that came from purity, not profit. Around them, the glittering chandeliers still shone, but the air felt lighter now, filled not with greed, but with the quiet power of truth. The cameras flashed again, but this time, they captured a moment that would be remembered for its courage, not wealth. The billionaire looked at the girl one last time, realizing that sometimes the smallest voices can change the course of empires. That truth can come from the most unexpected places, and that no deal, no matter how large, is worth more than integrity.